Hey fish friends, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. This is the fourth and final installment of how to make a DIY 3D background for your aquarium. It could be for a paludarium, it could be for a terrarium, it's pretty much for any type of tank. So normally in my other videos I kind of took you through step by step. In this one I am doing a voiceover just because I took a bunch of footage and I was just trying to really focus on this finishing side of making sure everything's perfect, so I wasn't going back and forth with the camera trying to record audio while I was working on the background. So anyway, this is about to go into the 40 breeder. I am using all-purpose 100% silicone, so make sure that you do use a silicone that is safe for aquariums, and make sure that it's 100% silicone and doesn't have like any mold inhibitors or anything else. You just cut off the tip there and poke a hole in the seal and use one of these guns obviously, and you're good to go. So here I am applying the first can of silicone. I'm just laying a really thick bead along the sides and along the bottom. So it is important to make sure that you are very liberal with this part. The more liberal that you are, the easier it is to just ensure that this background is going to stick to your aquarium. Now, if you are worried about, down the road removing it and having a bunch of silicone, if you're making a smaller background, or if you have a smaller aquarium, you could just do like a maybe 4 to 6 dollops, like a golf ball sized, or a little bit smaller, maybe a little ball in just the corners and the middle and the bottom. But I like using a lot more if I am going to use the silicone route, just because I don't have to worry about it coming off later. Because this is a larger background, I don't want any issues with it coming loose or floating. So I was very generous with the amount of silicone that I used, and I'm actually going through 2 jars of this stuff. So very easy to use. If you've never used silicone before, it's very simple, it's very inexpensive. I think this container cost me maybe like $5 per container, so about 2 of them, that's $10, or $10 worth of silicone, and then you can buy one of those silicone guns or whatever they can use for any type of anything that's dispensed from that type of tube. You can buy a gun like that. It's very, very inexpensive, just a few bucks. So anyway, so that was the first go around with the silicone. Now we're on to the second amount, or the second tube. I did cut the tip a little bit bigger on this one just to get a little bit fatter of a stream coming out, and this is where I'm really focusing on getting thick. So here I am going along that groove that I carved out, that I talked about in the previous video. And I will say, if you didn't watch parts 1, 2, or 3, I will put links above over in the next few minutes. So you'll want to make sure that you go back and watch part 1, watch part 2, and part 3. So I'll put those up here simultaneously. So anyway, so I'm just kind of going through the groove here and installing all the silicone, and again being very generous with the amount of silicone that I'm using, just making sure that it's in all the areas that are in contact with the glass or with the rim where I want to attach it. One thing about silicone is, should you decide to remove it later on, you can scrape it off with a razor blade and things like that. It can be kind of a hassle, but it's not the end of the world. So here I've applied all the silicone. As I zoom in here, you can see where pretty much every area that had contact with the back glass, where there was like a flat surface that I kind of had carved out and cut out to make contact with the glass, I put silicone there. So along that groove that I carved for the lip, the rim of the tank, as well as the sides and the bottom. And one of the things I did do is I made sure that the sides were really well siliconed, so that fish wouldn't be going back behind the background through the sides. And those caves that I created are pretty flush, so nothing really is going to be able to get in. So here I am, I'm just applying it. So I'm just, as you see, I'm just basically setting the background in place. You'll want to work relatively quickly. You're going to want to work in, obviously you don't want to be out in the wet. You want to be in a dry environment, and you want to make sure that you are doing this pretty quickly once you squeeze out the silicone. You only have a few minutes before it starts to set. I think within 30 minutes, if I read the directions correctly, it started to lose its tackiness. So here I'm basically just doing this right away, as you guys can see. And I'm just checking around to just make sure that it is properly adhering to the background in the areas that I wanted to. There you can see it's a really thick bead there along the side, and it's the same way on the other side. And then along the bottom, you can see that really thick bead. And then, which you can't see because the black rim on top is hiding it, but that groove that I carved out also has a lot of silicone in there. So it was a lot of silicone. Probably went overboard on it, but just wanted to make sure that I was really showing you guys the way to ensure that you don't have any flotation issues and buoyancy issues. You don't, like I said, you don't have to use this much. You could probably get away with just one tube and be just fine. I kind of just went a little overkill. And then the next thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that this sets in place, and you want to do it where it's tight against the back. So I had this perfect little rock that I put in the background, as you guys know. Took an old piece of 2x4 that I had from an earlier project, and just took an old Amazon box that was relatively the right size and just kind of squeezed it in there and pushed it up against the rock, and it was really tight. So just again ensuring that I've got a really tight fit here and that it's pushing the silicone tight against the background and against the glass, so that as it cures and as it dries, it will be nice and tightly fit. So again, it won't be loose and it won't have any issues with fish going behind here. Now the fish that I'm going to put in this tank, which I'll talk about in a future video, will be a little bit on the larger size, so they're not going to be tiny. Although I do have a couple guppies in there right now that are helping to just keep the sponge filter cycled. But down the road, the permanent fish won't be tiny fish. So here you can see what I didn't show in the other build is I did a little bit of touch up with some spray paint using that Krylon paint that I talked about in the other video. And there you can see some of the darker spots and some stuff where you might have a little concrete cracking. Then you can just kind of paint it over with the Krylon just to make sure that it dries. So now I'm back in the fish room. It is time to install this bad boy, and I did want to show you everything. I've got it on kind of a rolling dolly, just because it's a little bit easier than me trying to carry it without damaging the background. So I've got to, carefully squeeze behind that food stand there. What you will notice is I'm wearing different clothes, entirely different clothes. That's because this is a different day. This is a couple days after I set the silicone, and this allows the silicone to fully dry and cure and be ready to be installed. So I didn't want to do it on the same day, obviously, because it's wet and it wasn't ready to do. So here I'm kind of struggling with the fit, again, because I have that raised background, and what I didn't do prior to it is I didn't remove the light that I have fixed above, which you'll see here shortly. So I kind of had to jostle and mess around with it, which is why this video is fast forwarded a tiny bit, just so you don't have to see me struggle so long. And there's the light is on, and I am done installing, and here you can see the background is in place, the tank's in place. We'll move those air lines later, but you can see basically what it looks like, and this was the design that I wanted. And yeah, so really happy with it. I did have to redo the stand to make this fit, which you guys should be aware of. So anyway, I put some substrate in. I ended up using the remainder, or not the remainder, but some of the sand that we used for the concrete build. So if you remember, using the concrete for this build that we used to, the sand that we used to mix with the cement and to make the concrete, and also to add that texture. You can see the sand there on the background, then you can see that I added sand in the tank. I did add some aragonite later on, some fine aragonite that I mixed with the sand to give it a buffering quality to have that higher pH. Now I put in some plastic plants. These are not the plants that are going to remain. This is just to show you the idea that I had in mind. I am going to be putting like succulents or air plants in here, and they will be in there, and I can just kind of spray them with a squirt bottle for moisture. But I just wanted to put the plastic ones there for now because I don't have the air plants currently, and I wanted to just at least have you see what it looks like, and so you can kind of get the visual. And kind of this is my perspective, so this is me standing up looking at some of the tanks and then looking down on this tank, so you can kind of see what it looks like, and this is why I wanted to have that taller background. Now it's time to fill with water. Always the most fun part. use a plate. I like to use a dustpan, which helps in dissipating the water so you don't have any sand sifting around. And that's it, we're done. This background is complete, it's dry, and I think it looks great. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. Don't forget to watch those other 2 videos. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.